Welcome to The Fourth Bottom Line, the podcast where we meet people from business, charities and politics who are a force for good. In each episode, I talk to my guests about their inner side and how their internal changes have led to their outer success stories. We talk about the failures, spirituality and sometimes the painful experiences that have made them the unique individuals they are today. The main aim being for us to learn from and be inspired by them for our own lives. So, if you desire change in yourself and the world around you, do keep listening. And please remember to hit subscribe on your podcast platform of choice to make sure you never miss an episode. Hello, my name is Paul Hargreaves. I'm the founder and Chief Empowerment Officer of Cotswold Fair and Flourish, two businesses that put people and planet before profit. In 2015, we became one of the first B Corps in the UK, and I've written two books, Forces for Good and The Fourth Bottom Line. I'm passionate about changing the world for better and realised many years ago that to do this, we must also change ourselves. The outer impact of people, planet and profit has to be mirrored by an inner change, and that's what I call my fourth bottom line.
But, I've had failures at sort of every stage and, it is difficult navigating a life and a career outside where you were born, in a new country, in a career where people don't often look like you, often a very diverse face and a voice, being female in a very male-dominated corporate world, things just not working out. My books were difficult to get published. That was a problem. So I have had moments, but I think that one is what, if you're into tarot cards and all of that, it's called a tower moment, where literally you're at the top of a tower and the tower just collapses around you. My pandemic moment was really, really quite horrible.
My guest today is Mallika Basu. Mallika grew up in Kolkata, India, daughter of a businessman dad and Bollywood actress mum. Her granddad was a communist politician, a freedom fighter and head of state. She is a board advisor and strategic communicator with over 2 decades of experience. A former senior agency leader and spice brand founder, she is passionate about food as a force for good. Today, she helps organisations deliver social impact and commercial success with a particular focus on food, drink and hospitality. Mallika brings a fresh and diverse perspective to the challenges facing brands and organisations, from navigating cultural change to building meaningful stakeholder engagement. She's worked with the likes of Borough Market, Waitrose, the National Farmers Union and the Jamie Oliver Group. An early food blogger and author of 2 cookbooks, Mallika writes and presents for Good Food and contributes recipes and food culture stories to Waitrose, National Geographic Traveller and more. Her award-nominated newsletter, In Good Taste, explores food, culture, identity and sustainability, making big topics accessible to mainstream food lovers. Age 17, Mallika came last in a beauty contest, but says she was simply useless at standing still and looking pretty. Mallika dedicated her first book to a boss who described her as the journalist he had hired who couldn't write. On the other hand, one of her friends described her as Miss Marvel, the superhero. Mallika, welcome to The Fourth Bottom Line.
Thank you very much for having me, Paul. What an introduction.
I think you're the first guest I've had that entered a beauty contest, but commiserations that you came last.
Thank you very much. Clearly it was a terrible decision on my part.
Or maybe on the judge's part, you never know. So, as I normally do, I like to get stuck into people's early life. And obviously you've had an interesting background. Particularly interested in your grandfather, so we'll get on to him in a minute. But growing up in India, what age were you when you left India?
I left when I was 18.
Okay.
And we'd been coming here on holidays ever since I was about 11 years old. So it was like a given that I would study in England. You know, we were three sisters, and that was sort of what was expected. And my grandfather was this extraordinary character who'd been to law college. He'd studied law at UCL. So, you know, it was kind of his dream, really.
So he was head of state. I mean, that India is made up of a number of states. So which state was he head of?
So he was head of state, chief minister of West Bengal. He came here to do law. He became a Marxist on campus. And then the rest is history. He basically went back to India, became a freedom fighter. He was friends with Nehru, Gandhi, you know, all the big wigs of the freedom movement. And then went into opposition politics and eventually got voted in when I think I would have been about 3 or 4 years old when that happened.
So how much of that percolated down into your childhood? Did you see much of him, or was it mainly through your parents that you knew him?
He was a fantastic and very present grandfather. So I was incredibly lucky. In many ways, I've had this extraordinary childhood. You know, we used to go to Bhutan as the guests of the King of Bhutan, and Gorbachev used to send us sort of gifts at Christmas. And it was pretty spectacular. But on another hand, my parents tried incredibly hard to keep our feet on the ground and just make life as normal and as mundane as possible. So, you know, we were screwed down for things like pocket money. You know, I was sent into the office age 16. I don't know for what joy, to be honest with you. And I started modeling because my father refused to pay for clothes or shoes when I turned 17. So that's what happened.
Strangely enough, I had dinner with someone the other day who had an audience with the King of Bhutan.
Really?
He's an aid worker in Cambodia, actually. But anyway, we'd love to go down that rabbit hole, but we won't, because this is about you. But interested to compare your own teenage years, childhood, because I know you've got a couple of teenagers yourself. What would you say the main differences are between your upbringing and their upbringing here in the UK?
That's a really good question. I think the biggest difference, I would say, is that they're just not growing up under the spotlight. You know, when I was 17 and my glasses and braces had just come off, I came last in that beauty contest, which I shouldn't have gone to in the first place. But my name and my image was splattered across all the newspapers in India, saying Basu's granddaughter couldn't be Miss Universe. And it was amongst the most damaging and difficult, traumatic experiences of my life. You wouldn't wish that on any 17-year-old, you know, but you had to develop some really thick skin and just get on with it, which my kids will not experience in the same way. So I try and screw down on them as much as I can, but it's nowhere at the same level.
What? I mean, I love India. No secret to the listeners of this podcast, as I mentioned it a few times, but I love the spiritual connection in India, and it just seems that I may be completely wrong. I haven't lived there, obviously, but it seems less materialistic than here. Would you say that's true? And if so, are there some elements in which actually you would have liked your children to grow up in that less material environment?
I mean, yes, you know, spirituality is obviously a big thing for us. Yoga wasn't something you did because it was trendy. Everyone did yoga. Everyone practiced mindfulness. You know, we meditated as standard. We had massages regularly. And I do wish my kids had that, but we do try and pass a lot of that on to our children, because my ex-husband is also, you know, he's mixed heritage, so he's half Peruvian, half English. He grew up in the third largest city in Peru, which I still maintain is a small town. So we've tried to give them those values and really get them to build that fire in their belly without being too materialistic. So they don't get expensive presents as standard. You know, they have to work for everything pretty much. My daughter just finished her GCSEs, and within a week we were like, right, what job are you getting? So she's now a qualified FA football referee. So, you know, we do our bit. We try our bit, but obviously it's not the same.
Have they got a desire to go back there? Have you got a desire to go back to India, or do you think you'll be
I
here?
really couldn't.
No.
So I left at 18, those were very formative years. So I like to say that I was born and brought up in India, but I grew up here. And so I love my family and I miss them. And they're all there. I have friends there. My mum's there. My dad's there. I have a sister in India as well. But I don't know, I don't entirely fit in anymore. And I find things starting to irritate me within about a week. So I love going back on holidays, but I don't think I could live there anymore, unfortunately.
No, it seems, I don't know, again, maybe wrong, but sounds like you're a fairly affluent family over there. So, obviously here, money doesn't go quite as far as it perhaps does there. How has that been different for you, being, doing what you do now? It's, journalism can be really hard work, and that's how you started out. So
I think brutal might be a good word to use, but I used to joke that I have a riches to rags story, because of course, yes, I grew up in the lap of privilege, and it was wonderful, and my parents were, they were strict, but they were not generous, if that makes sense. And we had wonderful holidays and all the privileges. But it was a shock. I could have stayed in India and I could have got possibly any job that I wanted. I did an internship in journalism there. I was on a national newspaper. And I remember the editor-in-chief saying to me, why don't you just stay, because you're good and your writing's getting better. And I told him that I cannot afford a MAC lipstick on what you pay monthly. And he looked absolutely horrified. And I left. And I came here and I went from being a somebody in India to completely anonymous here with no support network at the age of 18.
That's really what I was trying to get to. So how was that? That sounds really difficult.
It was incredibly tough. I think about it now and I'm amazed that I managed to do that and get through it. And I don't think you stop to take stock of things like that enough, really. But I went back to a reunion, like an alumni dinner thing at my undergraduate university, which was University of Buckingham. And they gave me an award for inspiring an alumni, which was a massive shock. And I had to make an impromptu speech. I love talking, Paul, but come on, even that was, a bit much for me. But I told them the story and it really gave me the heebie-jeebies, because my dad and granddad drove me down. So they had a chauffeur-driven Bentley that took me to my university. They chucked me out. So someone opened the door so I could get out. And then the driver came out, got my suitcases out of the boot and just plonked them beside me. I'd never left home.
This is Buckingham.
This is University of Buckingham.
Right.
And they just left me and they said bye and they drove off. It was extraordinary.
I'm just imagining the other students here. Who on earth is this turning up? You're thinking of it from your point of view, but I'm thinking, hang on a minute. Yes. This is a celebrity arriving.
Remember that University of Buckingham back in the day was a private university and it was tuition fees, and so it was expensive, so it was quite elite and quite an expensive institution.
Everyone turned up in a Bentley.
Everyone turned up in a Bentley, Paul. Okay. Yes, right. I wasn't the only one. No one blinked an eyelid. No one came to help me. But what then happened was they hadn't realized that I stayed on the first floor. So my accommodation was on the first floor of this little property, this sort of 2-story, student halls. I'd never lifted a suitcase in my life. I've never actually had to do anything in a kitchen. And and it just went from there. I just took it from there. And it was quite sobering and quite fortifying, shall we say, from an early age.
I wonder how many food writers in the UK hadn't actually been in a kitchen until they were 18. Probably not many.
Probably not, to be honest.
I want to get back to your drive and enthusiasm and ambition, because I talked to a couple of people who know you better than me as part of my preparation. They both use that word, drive and ambition, the 2 words actually, isn't it? Where does that come from?
That's a really good question. Who do I blame at this point? Well, I think definitely from my grandfather. He was incredibly driven, very self-motivated. What he achieved in many respects. He was the longest serving democratically elected communist leader in the world. So his name was in the Guinness Book of World Records. My father, he struggled through school, but he turned into an extremely successful businessman and did well in life, and is actually an excellent cook. So he's got, ambitions of a chef and pretensions of a chef. I hope he doesn't hear this at some point. So I definitely think I got some of my cooking love from him. Right. And my mom is very enterprising and entrepreneurial. She's also a fierce feminist who does not believe that women should be sitting around and not using their full potential. So we got punished for being quiet when we were younger. And, she made it a point to instill in us this value that whatever our needs are, we should be financially self-sufficient. And I suppose it just went from there.
Was that quite unusual in India?
Very much so, very much so. And, my mother grew up with quite a strong father who worked in advertising. So he ran his own advertising firm. And, she was a big self-starter. So she's a fine arts student. She loved theatre. She went into theatre. Then she did movies. And she did more indie Bollywood rather than, the kind of mainstream dancing around trees stuff. I should clarify in case she ever hears this. But, she was very different. She never cooked when we were growing up because she didn't like the domesticity and boredom of it all. She never allowed us to do sewing and knitting because she said, unless the school taught carpentry and mechanics to girls, we were not going to do sewing and knitting. And my dry cleaners are making a fortune out of me, by the way, because of her. But, there were all these things that she instilled in us that actually have been useful, sometimes a bit detrimental as well. But I think she's been a huge influence in my life and in my formative years of what women should be like in a modern world.
What were the main values instilled in you when you were growing up?
That's a really good question. I think fairness and justice, I'm going to have to say, because I have thought about that a lot recently. Like, where does all this food as a force for good stuff come from? Why am I just making my life so difficult? and at university in my undergrad, one of the most, I would say, inspiring and life-changing classes and lectures I went to was on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I was very moved by that at the age of 18, 19. And it stuck with me. I've never been happy at the bottom rung. Life for me has always been about self-actualization. And that is not always good. Sometimes it is, not the best outcome for me. And I've made sacrifices and I've sort of, really suffered as a result of that. So that was a big thing, fairness and justice. But also for my mum, it was about helping others. There was a lot of kind of humility is a big one.
Right.
I struggled to call myself a leader. I think calling yourself a leader deserves to be in the same bucket as calling yourself a legend or an icon or a veteran. I think those words are best left to other people to describe you. So, there's a few things that have kind of set me on my journey.
Yeah, to some degree I agree with you, because there are some people who call themselves a leader and actually no one's following them. So you're only a leader if others are following. If you're well, I know people are following you, so that does make you a leader, actually.
Well, I take this as professional opinion, Paul,
So I'm interested to talk about just touched on it, your purpose in life. Was that, when did that emerge? Was that there when you were a teenager, or did it come later? Because I can see where the strong opinions come from, you having learned a bit about your family. But in terms of your purpose and this, reversing injustice and fairness and connecting that with food, did that emerge slowly, or was it a sudden thing?
It had been building for a while, I won't lie. So I started writing about food 6 or 7 years into my corporate career. And it was grating on me that people thought Indian cooking was really complicated, time-consuming, difficult, that everything was laden with grease. They confuse Indian takeaways, which aren't Indian at all, by the way. They're Sileti, as you know, from Bangladesh. They're delicious, but they're not Indian. And they were confusing that for the food we were eating at home. And, things hadn't really evolved, and Madhur Jaffrey had done an incredible job of breaking down some of the boundaries and barriers to Indian home cooking. but we hadn't had like a sort of modern face of it. So my journey with Indian cookery started, and food writing started, with this idea of addressing some of those perceptions of what it means to be Indian, the cuisine of India, the variation. This is a nation that gave the world 7 Miss Universe and Miss Worlds. We gave the world yoga, right? We are not eating Indian takeaways every day. So I suppose that was my first brush with being purpose-led. And that did well for me. You know, my books did well. Not only did they catch the imagination of a non-Indian audience who found someone relatable, someone who went into an office, someone who had kids, who had, you know, the 2 up, 2 down terrace property. And so I wasn't the sort of cotton sari wearing auntie or a chef. So that really struck a chord. But also I captured the imagination of lots of Indians, because India was moving on.
Right.
So you had the diaspora, you had all these people overseas, you had Indians in India who were leading more global urban lifestyles that were converging with how people overseas lived. And so it started with that. And then, of course, I published cookbooks. I kept working in the corporate world, and I started collecting all these experiences of unfairness and injustice. So I had quite an interesting experience getting published. I had 11 rejections for my first book proposal and 9 rejections for the second. And that was entirely to do with structural and systemic challenges with how diversity and inclusion are approached, and the way the food media and food publishing in particular is set up. I then collected all this fodder from being a woman of color, you know, youngish, in quite a male-heavy environment in the media world, so working in the corporate world. You know, I'd often get mistaken for being a PA. People wouldn't look at me until I got talking. You know, I'd have to enter rooms where it was all men and just me. You know, the classic standing joke used to be, too many chiefs, only one Indian, which actually at the time I thought it was quite funny. But I only learned later that it's a microaggression. And so I built all that fodder, and I kept that kind of somewhere in my psyche. And in 2018, I saw a moment to voice my frustration, and it was to do with a turmeric curry kit that a retailer, which I will not name, had put on the shelves. And I basically went on X, that was Twitter back then, and I voiced it, and I ended up on national TV and radio talking about cultural appropriation, talking about how this just has to stop. You know, you can't just call something a Bengali turmeric curry kit. So that was the first time I did that. And in 2020, when BLM and Me Too and, you know, Stop Asian Hate were all kicking off, I saw my moment. I'd just become unemployed. I was unemployed, single, divorced, with no financial support. And I saw my moment. I'd just become self-employed. And I packaged up all that rage, frustration, and learning into a session. And I took that out as my food, as a force for good. Peace.
Well, you say rage, but I'm not sure it is, because it's channeled in a very positive direction. So, yes, there are lots of angry people with very, very good reason to experience what you experience. But I think if it's just rage, they don't get heard. But if you channel the rage into something positive, they're the people that the world actually listens to. So talk to me a bit about how you managed to do that without just being really angry and upset.
I think a long career in communications helped, to be honest. You know, I'd had a solid, successful career being a people pleaser, if I'm honest with you.
Right.
I was really good at it. And so I led with charm and champagne. Like at this point, you know, I'm already managing director. I had a team of 16 people. You know, I had a revenue target for my team for £1 million. So, you know, I wasn't a spring chicken, and I was doing this at the age of 36. So then I had a few years as a strategic, like a senior consultant. So I was a partner in an agency working part-time while I wrote my second cookbook, and, as you know, co-founded a spice company. So I'd got to a point in my career where, you know, I could use my experience, and I knew people followed me, people liked me, and they followed me. And as they say, you catch more bees with honey than with acid. And I wasn't the first person. I wasn't the first person annoyed or angry.
No.
But what I did was I changed the way it was being approached. And I led with if I couch this within a broader context of positive, practical change. I'm not here to hate on anyone. I'm not here to be annoyed or angry or point fingers. But we are in the midst of seismic shifts in the way we look at unfairness and injustice. This whole idea of the woke world in 2020. And there were people who genuinely wanted to do better. So I saw my moment and I went for it. I created a very classic corporate technique, which is you have a door opening session. You deliver the session, and then if people like what they said, they might invite you in for further consultancy or advisory. And I really went from there, and it's been brilliant for me.
Did you get opposition?
Not in the slightest. Funnily enough, I get hate. I get a lot of hate online. I recently did a series on my Instagram which flipped the script of cultural appropriation and demonstrated what it feels like on the other side and looks like. And of course, it looks utterly ridiculous. If you flip it, it's just, imagine doing strawberries and cream with bananas and yogurt, right? So that was quite fun, but I did about 6 or 7 and I had to stop because, it was grating on me and I was just getting so much hate, even by my standards, Paul. I had to draw a line under it. But I think I proved my point and I got booked to do my session a few more times, so that was fine.
It's a fascinating story that you've, lost a lot and suddenly out of that emerged this new side of you, which has probably been there all along, hasn't it?
Yes, and it's somewhat phoenix from the ashes, but I don't want to diminish the struggle and the strife and the pain because in 2020, I found myself unemployed, single for the first time in my life. So I was a serial monogamist before that. I'd been married and with my then ex-husband for 21 years. I had no financial support because, I earned too much before it all went to pot, frankly. And I was in charge of 2 kids who were very upset and sad about what was going on. And then, if things couldn't get any worse, we had a global pandemic. And, I've not made the best decisions in life. I quit a very stable, sensible, 3-day-a-week, well-paid consultancy gig just before the pandemic started, so in February, to establish my spice business. And, I did that thinking, I'll use gardening leave to establish my spice company. And then what's the worst thing that can happen? I'll just get another job. I know all the CEOs. I know so many people in the industry, 20 years in comms. And what's the worst thing that can happen? A global pandemic, right? But, I do say, Paul, that when you're at rock bottom, then there's nowhere lower to go. The only way is up.
And loads of people who've been on this podcast, the majority have been through a time in their lives that's been pretty desperate and a real low point. And I have too. Also divorce, which was pretty traumatic and messed me up for a number of years, if I'm honest. But, now would say that and a few other negative things that happened, probably spaced out a bit more than yours, which seemed to be very concentrated. Actually, I wouldn't be without them because it's made me the person I am today, and I think probably the same is true for you. So, I would probably go as far to say that everyone needs some experience of suffering, to put it in. It's there's lots of people suffering far more than we have, but I think everyone needs that really low point. And I think it's probably about finding ourselves as human beings. I'm not sure you get there. I came from a fairly privileged family here in the UK. Both my mum and dad were doctors. Same for you. So I think we almost need stuff stripping away in order to fully emerge, to find our purpose. And I don't know, do you agree with that?
I absolutely would. I'm sorry to hear about your divorce. And of course, I relate very closely to that. So, it really, someone described getting divorced to me as distress. And I just laughed at him and he was right. So, but I do agree with you. I think, sometimes you need to hit rock bottom to rise. And the best thing about that is that you can rebuild in the right direction. Sometimes your life just kind of takes over and you're doing things and you're kind of on this treadmill, I call it the rapids. You're on the rapids and you're just navigating the twigs and the little branches and the stones and the, rocks, but you don't see that there's going to be a fall in front. So you need something to actually get you to focus and kind of think about, well, what happens next? And I'd been thinking about doing something more with my love of food for a long, long time. But, I also earned a lot of money, and I did well. I was successful in comms and, it was a hard decision to make. I just wasn't being able to work out how to do that. And so I'm quite grateful actually looking back. I think the challenge is when that happens, when the rug gets pulled out from under you, there is this complete moment of helplessness and sort of, oh my goodness, what do I do now? And the challenge is to not let that defeat you. Cry the tears, drink the wine, whatever it takes. But then find a way out, because there is definitely a way out.
I mean, for me, I'd be interested to know if it's the same for you. For me, it was certainly the marriage breaking up was the first real time I'd failed at anything apart from my first driving test, which I had another car, so that was moved on from that. But it was the first big failure, and I had to fail. In order, I was doing everything in my own strength, and it was all about me. And having a big failure of a marriage breaking up with 4 kids probably brought in some humility, actually. Do you relate to that?
No, I've had a lot of failure, actually. It's been a ritual journey of potted failures, if I'm honest with you. But, I've had failures at sort of every stage, and, it is difficult navigating a life and a career outside where you were born, in a new country, in a career where people don't often look like you, often a very diverse face and a voice, being female in a very male-dominated corporate world, things just not working out. My books were difficult to get published. That was a problem. So I have had moments, but I think that one is if you're into tarot cards and all of that, it's called a tower moment, where literally you're at the top of a tower and the tower just collapses around you. And that was my pandemic moment, was really, really quite horrible.
Where does that grit, I love the word grit actually, where's that grit and determination come from? Because, how many times did you try and get your book published? 11, did you
11 failures for the first one, 9 for the second.
I mean, okay, so most people probably would have given up on the first book, let alone not, after finally you got that published. They certainly wouldn't have done another book. So what's going on? This is not, you need to know this isn't normal. Okay, well, most people would have given up a long time ago, Mallika.
Someone called me indomitable the other day, and I don't know, that's I think a good word. But in my recent life, I think poverty has been a really good motivator. I'm on my own, there's no bank of mummy and daddy, there's no generational wealth, there's no husband or partner. So, I do have to run a household in central London on my own. And so I can't afford to fail. That is the reality of it. And, that's a huge motivator. And it keeps me going. Earlier on, I'm very motivated by people telling me I can't do something. Yeah. So when people say to me, you can't do this, my mind instantly says, oh, yes, I can. And so I have used that as a massive force for self-motivation. And things haven't gone to plan. The spice business I had to divest from. I couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford to be invested and spending time on, frankly, a premium brand startup, which didn't pay. My focus and my energy had to be invested and 100% committed in something that was paying, and that was my advisory work and my media work. So I had to pivot, and it broke my heart into tiny little pieces. Like, it still makes me very sad. It makes me sadder talking about the spice business than the divorce, to be honest. I hope my ex-husband doesn't hear this.
He's probably not listening.
Good. But it was heartbreaking because that was a big dream. But yes, those are my motivators, I think.
Yeah, so someone used the word indefatigable about you.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, I had to look it up what it meant.
Well, tell me more.
Well, obviously it's got the word fatigue in there, hasn't it?
Yes,
so it's someone who
exactly.
doesn't get tired. They
yeah.
push on.
Right. Someone once said I had infectious energy, and that did worry me a little bit because it was during COVID, and talking about infections as being a good thing probably wasn't timely. But yes.
Yeah, I mean, another word that both the people I talked to use was vivacious. So that is about life just oozing out of you. But there must be times when you don't feel like that. I mean, let's be honest, our social media, which you're on, we only put our highlights on there. So what is Mallika like behind the scenes?
That's been a big learning journey for me, to be honest. Firstly, that's very nice of my contacts to have said that, and thank you. I have had to learn to rest the older I've got. Resting does not come easily to me, and that's a fallacy. You cannot work when you're tired and you're exhausted. And a lot of my work has developed into thinking. I need to be able to think, and I need to be able to formulate my thinking in writing or in speaking. You cannot do that when you're exhausted.
No.
And I found a way to deal with it, which is I kind of go into a Mallika cave.
Sounds interesting. Tell me more.
There is a Mallika cave I go into when I'm exhausted or when life is just becoming too much. And it involves me having early nights, not drinking any alcohol, eating the most healthy food imaginable, going to bed early, doing a lot more exercise than I normally would, and just shutting down, only speaking and communicating with people who are very close to me, who are genuine sort of well-wishers. And I just go off social media for bits and no one really cares. My ego's not that big,
And how many days is this for?
It's sort of ongoing. Obviously, I can't shut down entirely because I do have to go out for work. I have to go to business meetings. I have to meet people. A lot of my networking involves food and drink, as you can imagine. So there's a lot of going out. So I do that. I do that as work. But then I will spend a significant chunk of the week doing absolutely nothing. And when the teens are with me, so I co-parent, the teens are with me half the week.
Yeah.
And when they're with me, I go into mummy mode. So I only invest the time I need to. I don't do other things. I tell my business contacts that I'm afraid I can't. I have the kids here. And of course, they're teenagers now, so it's quite good that they have their own teen caves that they go into, So like I ring a little dinner bell and they come out for food. You know this.
If you're lucky.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I just put the food away, Paul. They don't get food. I find it's a wonderful motivator for teen parenting. But I do that. So that's one thing I do very diligently is just when life is too much, I just shut it completely down.
So this is interesting. I think people can learn from this. So what are the signals to you that you need to go into that Mallika cave?
The Mallika cave time tends to start when I find my brain slowing down and I'm finding myself getting emotional. I'm not a hugely emotional person. I'm very good at compartmentalizing and I box things up so I don't carry the weight of the world with me when I go about my jobs in the world and my duties in the world. But when that bucket starts draining, and last year, for example, and I've never talked about this publicly, but I started having really bad panic attacks, and it was triggered by me entering a cold, dark, empty flat. And I've started finding that was really setting me off because I have this incredible life, which is very fabulous. And I'd go up on stage and people would tell me how amazing I was. And I was in this flowing frock, looking $1 million. And I'd go from that into just empty space, empty, cold, dark, silent space. And I started panicking and I knew something was wrong because I had to call my sister and basically say to her, if you don't hear from me for 4 consecutive days, can you please bang on my door? Because it struck me that when the kids are with their dad for, the period, like a Wednesday to Sunday, I'm entirely on my own. So if something terrible happened to me, no one would know. And so I was having these horrible moments of thinking that, I could be the dead old lady lying in the bathroom.
Not old, but...
Well, dead lady. Thank you, Paul. And so then I knew. So it doesn't always have to be that extreme. Sometimes it's just the brain slowing down, getting a bit emotional, struggling to cope, everything just getting too much. But there is a moment where I just have to pack everything up and I just tell people, I'm unavailable. I cannot deal with this right now. I will come back to you next week. And people are great.
Yeah, but most people don't have the self-awareness to do that, I don't think.
Is that so? Do you think?
I think so. I mean, I've only yesterday ran across someone who clearly hadn't done that because they were they should have done,
right?
But they'd carried on and got themselves into a terrible state.
Oh gosh, okay. I think I might have undiagnosed ADHD because I don't think it matters.
I think I have as well, actually. But I have had the same conversation with someone else who did get diagnosed. I said, well, at my old age, I am old, but at my age, I kind of know what works for me. Do I need to get diagnosed?
No.
Look, I'm happy for anyone to disagree with that, but I think I know myself.
Exactly.
It's taken this long to for me to get to know myself.
Exactly.
But I think I can probably manage that. But I like the rhythm of that, actually, the kind of locking yourself away and then emerging to do something, and then because there's too much noise, isn't there, generally, in this society we're in now. It's just go, 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 noise, noise, noise. When I go to the gym, I leave my phone in the locker. I walked into the gym the other day and everyone on the machines was on the phone. No one was actually doing any exercise.
What?
They were all just sitting there looking at their phones. What?
That's just bizarre. Why would you go to the gym to do that?
Well, yeah, I guess they were resting between the thing. But anyway.
That makes no sense whatsoever. Self-discipline, I think, has been one of my big learnings and personal and professional development pieces over the last 5 years of being self-employed. And, you have to be diligent about it because my work involves me needing to be fighting fit at all times.
Yes.
I cannot fall sick. I cannot feel anything less than 95%, I'm going to say. And, I need to look $1 million as well. So therefore, as soon as I feel fatigue or pain or strife, struggle coming on, that's it. I know where the buck stops, basically.
So this is a bit like a spiritual practice. I was going to ask you about your spirituality and how much of the background in India had carried through to anything you do on a daily or weekly or monthly basis now in terms of any spiritual practices that have helped you be the person that you are.
How woo-woo can I be at this point?
Pretty, because
you're going to turn all your listeners off.
You're talking to someone who has meditation in their board meetings. So,
I read about meditation in your book. I was very impressed. So I do quite a few things. I manifest. I have manifestations written down. I always start my mornings with being grateful for what I have. I think it's really important to start the day with positive energy. And, if you start your mornings with woe is me and all of this kind of stuff, it's a recipe for...
Or listening to the news, it has the same effect.
Horrible, I think, exactly. Never turn the news on first thing in the morning. So I do that. I give grateful thanks quite regularly. I have manifestations I've written down and they do eventually work out for me. Like one of my big manifestations a few years ago was I want to be able to make ends meet and have a comfortable life doing what I love in food, drink and hospitality. And that is exactly what I do now. And the journey has been interesting, but,
That sounds a bit like a mission statement.
Well, yes. I wrote that down and I looked at it.
Yeah.
And, I did the same for personal relationships, family relationships with my ex-husband, with the kids. I've written down things that are important for me. Some of it hasn't quite worked, but I feel like in time it will happen. I exercise quite regularly. So obviously a lot of my work revolves around eating and drinking. So, I make sure I do Pilates, I do yoga, I do HIIT, and that keeps me in check. I also watch what I eat. So, I think it is part of spiritual practice. What you put in your mouth is probably the most intimate and spiritual things you can do, one of the most spiritual and intimate things you can do.
Yeah.
So, being mindful about what you eat and making sure, you're putting good things
Yeah.
in as well as a bag of crisps now and
No.
again. I'm not entirely unreasonable. But
No, I love that. I love that.
so all of those things, I think.
And are there, is there anything like that you're passing on to your children? Or are they resistant to it?
I think it's probably a bit early. I don't know what I would have thought. I mean, we did yoga, but, my mum's been trying to get me to do mindful practice and chanting and yoga nidra and all this stuff for years now. And I'm still massively resisting her pull. So, no, we used to do chanting together. We used to do Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. And they found that quite calming when, the divorce was happening and we were in the pandemic. But they too, they're at that strange age now, 16 and 14, where pretty much anything I say, they just reject. So it might take a little bit longer. But I hope that, we're talking about leadership. I hope that I can be a positive role model for them. And certainly they've been very supportive for my life and business choices and career choices. So that's a good thing, I suppose.
And it does feel like you've come out the other side of the divorce and stuff. Do you feel like you've healed from that now?
Very much so. I think the divorce, it was a horrible journey. It's like going through a dark tunnel, and it was scary. It was really scary to be alone. I'm on my own financially. I'm self-employed. There aren't a lot of people at my level who are sort of from, the global majority, if you like, in the business world. And it has been terrifying. But I feel like I am coming out through the other side with the divorce and the career. But I'm not quite ready to stop yet. I can't be comfortable yet, I don't think.
Well, if anyone who says they're going to stop, that's generally when things go wrong.
Well, exactly.
I actually was thinking about this in the car earlier today, that the people I most like spending time with are people who are very much trying to change themselves and realising they're in a process of transformation. And in fact, all the guests I think I've had on this podcast are aware that they're still changing. Just heard someone the other day who is getting on in years, and he was still talking about changing and improving himself.
That's very impressive.
Well, I think it adds life to people when they're like, and you strike me as someone who's very much like that. So how would you say you are changing? How much have you changed in the last few years?
Gosh, I think I would say I've changed completely. I'm like a very different person now. And my interests have changed. I spend a lot of time reading, learning. I've massively reduced my social circle. I used to be a PR bunny, let's be honest. I've also become much more confident in my abilities. One of the challenges with being a bit different is that you're not entirely sure if you're fitting the mold, and that takes quite a lot of confidence, even by my standards. And, it took me a while to believe that, I was entitled and able to be a leader or in that leadership category because, I enjoy house music. I like to wear a flippy skirt. I enjoy a glass of bubbly or two, I say what I think. And that is me as an individual and my authentic self. And it took me a while to bring that to the table. I'm also part of this world because I have public personality, public profile. And I'm part of this world where oversharing is very common. On Instagram, people kind of talk about what's happening in their lives, and it's blow-by-blow details and filming yourself. Those things take a huge amount of confidence and self-assurance. And so I've sort of come to terms with how much of myself I can put out there and in what way.
Yeah, how do you get the balance right with that?
You have to really stay true to yourself, Some of it was my own hang-up, like filming myself eating was entirely my hang-up. And I'm a little bit dysmorphic. I don't like seeing myself in a mirror. I feel a bit like Shrek is looking back at me. And I think the idea of eating, like being sloppy with food on camera and filming yourself while you're at it is just abhorrent, if I'm honest with you. But that's what the algorithm likes. So I've had to find a way around it. But I do it in a very measured way. I do it with the lens of a journalist rather than a social media influencer, which is what I am. I'm not an influencer, and I do it in my own pace and time. I don't feel pressurized to do it. And if that means I have 40,000 followers on Instagram and not 400,000, then that's my life. That's what I get, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, it's what you're saying, I think, is common to many people. And the temptation is to feel like we're the only ones feeling that. And, particularly for women, and particularly of women of colour, probably there's so much pressure in society, pushing them to do the opposite of really what you're doing. So I think some of what you're picking up is the society negative energy rather than actually what's in you. Would you say, or not?
Very much so. You wear expectation quite heavily, I think, when you're from the global majority. Your parents expect something from you, and I've chosen quite an unconventional path by Indian standards.
Yeah.
And I come clearly from a very liberal home, and quite sort of Western upbringing. But even so, I got divorced. I wrote cookbooks. It's just like
how did they deal with all that, by the way?
I mean, with slight bafflement and disbelief. Just how did she turn out like this? But I'd argue that my grandfather forged an unusual path.
Exactly.
My mum has. So did my dad. No one expected him to become a businessman, So I think they were surprised. I don't think they still understand how I pay my bills. If I'm honest with you, I don't think they get the comm space or the media pace. My father asks me all the time if I'm earning enough money. That's his primary concern. Are you earning enough money? But tell me, what is the financial situation? So I just went on a holiday and he called me. I was in the most beautiful spot at the top of a mountain, sort of overlooking the harbour. And we ended up having a conversation which went, now tell me about your financial life. And I'm like, not now, please. So,
yes,
yeah.
no, my dad. I only really was employed for 3 years.
Really?
Yeah, and then I left my job, which my dad, couldn't understand at all. He said, "What about your company car?" I said, "Well, I'll just buy another car." What about superannuation? He said, "What? What's that?" I think he meant the pension. Well, I haven't got one, so I still haven't.
Brilliant.
Actually. But
you got to love them.
But
these parents.
the pressure in society is maybe, I don't know if it is so much, but there is a huge pressure to conform to quite a narrow
Very
standard,
much so.
and people don't follow their hearts, do they? And I think you seem, from what I know of you, you seem to have followed your heart.
Yeah, very much so.
Which, yes, it's not a bed of roses. There are struggles, difficulties. There's a life in you that is there, which if you'd stayed in the corporate world, would that be there as much?
Probably not. But for balance, I think I should add that don't make it harder than it needs to be. So I was already plotting my next project. And I stopped myself in my tracks. I just went, what am I doing? I'm doing that thing where I've just scaled a mountain and I'm at the top and I'm looking for the next mountain to climb. And actually, let's just take in the view. Let's just enjoy this.
Yes.
Let's not start planning the descent and the climb.
No, enjoy
and it's
the view.
exhausting.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so, also having that self-awareness and the self-discipline to say, do you know what, I'm just going to rest here for a bit and then just enjoy this moment. And it is enough. What I'm doing right now without slipping down the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Just let's take this in and enjoy this moment.
Yeah, I don't think I'm too good at that.
Yeah.
I
Do
think
you think it's the ADHD then, the undiagnosed?
It might
Can
be.
we call it you ADHD?
Yeah, I mean, I probably don't celebrate the wins enough.
Same.
And sometimes we do just need to stop and
Very much so. Exactly. Exhale.
there's not enough breathing going on. What do you think you'll be doing in 5-10 years' time?
That's a really good question. Sunning myself on the coast of Portugal, I think, would be quite nice.
Why Portugal?
I have friends who live there.
Okay.
Yes, I know it quite well. I go there a fair bit.
Food's good.
Yeah, the food's fantastic. I think I'd like to write a lot more. It would be nice to be known for my writing. And obviously, in another 10 years, I should be even more experienced in advisory. and racked up a few more experiences. So that would be quite good. But I think whatever I do, I would like to have a life of balance. I think you shouldn't just chase money and chase work.
So tell me a bit more about what is a life of balance?
A life of balance is having time and space to hang out with yourself, to really enjoy quiet moments of peace on your own. It's being able to spend precious time with your friends and close family. I think that's something that's really taken a hit for me in the last 5 years. I have incredibly patient friends and family. I apologize a lot. I can be a bit of a letdown. I do cancel things. I take months to get things in the diary. One of the sad byproducts of my chosen lifestyle is I don't throw that many dinner parties anymore, which is a bit of a shame. That's gone by the wayside.
Well, it's probably like work for you, isn't it?
It is a bit, but I enjoy it. I still really enjoy it. And I still do the odd one, but, it's not, I used to do this Bolly and Bollywood thing. So we do Bollinger and basically Indian food and Bollywood music.
Sounds good. I'll if you do.
Come on a long pull, yes. Bring your wife. Let's party. But that's slightly fallen by the wayside. And I think, in a life of balance, you should be able to enjoy what you do for a living, of course, and be good at it, but also make space and time for the things and the people you love. And that is something I definitely need to work on going forward.
And what legacy do you want to leave behind? I mean, there's a lot of time left yet, but is there anything that you haven't done yet that you want to write? I'd really like to do that.
That's a good question. I think the food, being known for someone who really made a change using food love as a sort of mechanic and a platform would be great. I love connecting people, joining the dots. So there are so many incredible conversations I see happening and meeting amazing people. And, the former CEO of Borough Market called me a super connector. And I love joining good people, and to be known for that would be fantastic. And actually leaving a legacy where people can openly and honestly be part of something that creates change using food and eating and drinking would be really great. That would be fantastic.
Well, I did ask someone what they thought. I mean, this, many, many years in the future, what's going to be your obituary?
No. Right? It wasn't Mallika Basu for Prime Minister, was it?
They didn't say that.
Good.
And they thought what should be there was I made a difference to food and people's relationship to it.
Oh.
Which I actually loved the relationship to it bit of that.
That's really good. Well, that's kind of the big dream, yes.
Because we don't have the right relationship to it, do we?
We don't. And
I mean, increasingly less so as well.
I think it's getting worse.
Yes.
And it's incredible because it's almost disproportionate to the amount of food content around. It's like the more recipes and food we have online and on social media, the less we seem to care about where it comes from, the impact it has on people, the planet, ourselves, our nutrition and health. It's extraordinary, really.
The more TV chefs, the less people cook
Less
at home.
people, it's fantastic.
They're just eating takeaways, sitting watching
it's extraordinary, isn't
various programs. But it's definitely true that the more profile food gets in society, this society anyway, the less we seem to eat it properly.
It is a inverse, what is it? Inverse
proportion.
Inverse proportion, that's it.
That said, obviously our business has grown because more people are eating better food, but I think it is in quite a small percentage of society.
I think if we all made moves to just be a little bit more engaged with what we're eating and doing a bit better, that would already shift the dial massively. And by the way, the Chop and Chat cooking format TV show is, it's on the out.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
There was a big feature on it recently. So that is a dated format because, of course, everyone's getting their digital entertainment on social media.
Yeah.
So hallelujah. What can I say?
There you go. That's the future. Right, we're coming to the end of our time. So there's some questions I ask all my guests. And the first one is a piece of advice you wish you'd had before you started out.
I was thinking about this, and I think it would be, I wish I'd known that things always don't go to plan. I've taken failure and things not working out really badly. So although I've dealt with a lot of it, when it actually happens, it's not pleasant, and I've felt very devastated. And I think I wish I'd known that sometimes things don't work out the way you want them to, but they work out better than you ever thought they would. So you should really think about that, consider that. Maybe you're dodging a bullet, yes. So maybe you're escaping something that wasn't quite right for you. I'll give you an example. When I set up as self-employed in the pandemic, I set up my own communications consultancy. But people weren't buying PR from me. What people wanted was my expertise and my knowledge. They wanted to know what was in my head.
Yeah.
And that's when I went down the advisory and NED route. And actually that's worked a lot better for me for what I want to achieve, my big life goal and dream career. So that's one. And then failures, actually, they're just moments to redirect yourself. So just think, okay, that hasn't happened. So what do I do now? Because you can keep knocking and banging at a door, right? And if that door isn't opening, find another door. Don't just keep bashing away.
Rather than giving up. Yes.
Exactly.
Well,
So I think that,
yeah.
yes, that would be mine.
And a piece of advice that you did have that you've actually chosen to ignore.
How long have you got? No, I'm only joking. The one piece of advice I've heard a lot in the last 5 years, whenever the chips have really, really been down, I have heard, why don't you just jack it all in and get a job?
Oh, yeah, I heard that as well.
I bet you have. So it's a lot of commonalities here, Paul. It's like the life of entrepreneurship. And I've just ignored them. I've gone, I'm going to give it until next year. I'm going to give it 6 months. And I've just gone off and done something. And something's inevitably happened that's made me think, that's a sign. That's a sign I'm meant to persevere and just keep pushing, because that's the door just getting a little bit ajar. And if the door's ajar, I could push it open.
Have you gone back to those people?
No, they're watching me with absolute shock, horror and amazement, wondering if I'm completely stark raving nuts.
Well, one of mine, one of the naysayers that told me, it's never going to work, what you're doing.
No, really?
No, they did. Yeah, 2 people, when I started Cotswold Fair, that they said, don't do it, it won't work. And one of them, I shouldn't have done, but I did drop them an email. I think it was the first month. They said we'd never go more than £500,000 revenue in a year. And the first month where we did £1 million, I wrote to them, this is a long time ago, and said, thank you for your words, because they've actually spurred me on, and here we are today.
Very much. I guess it's the second bit of advice that I get is find a rich husband, but Paul, that hasn't happened either. Just ignoring that and cracking on.
Well, you never know who's listening, do you? So, and finally, this book, Fourth Bottom Line, when I've written about 50 leadership characteristics, is there one that resonates particularly with you at the moment?
I thought the self-discipline and self-awareness it really struck a chord, because that's been a learning journey I've gone on. And you have to be in a good place. You need to recognize what your limits and your strengths are. I thought gentle was a really interesting one. I think I'm really, really quite harsh and mean to myself. and learning to just recognize my own, trajectory and the good things I've achieved, and patting myself on the back. Time to time has been a bit of a journey for me to grab my head around as well. And I think, you spend so much time being kind to other people, but showing yourself some kindness is really critical, because, you are the most important person in your own life.
Yeah, I think we're all still learning that, aren't we? Self-compassion, it's a big one. Yeah.
I thought silent and anonymous were interesting.
Well, you're going to go through the whole book now, aren't
you? Just those. You didn't have timeliness, which I might fail on as well.
I obviously don't think that's in the top 50.
Good.
And in many cultures, it's actually rude to be on time, of course.
Of course, I shall take that.
Yeah. Good. Well, thanks for joining me. Before we go, though, I will mention your third book, which is coming
Yes.
out by the time this podcast goes out. I think it'll be available to order.
It is available to pre-order right now. Yes, it is a third book. It's a bit of a departure from my cookbook writing. I've written In Good Taste, a curious eater's guide to a fairer food world. And it basically talks to tastemakers and change makers, people who love food and want to work in and with it. And it breaks down some of the challenges and opportunities we have ahead of us. So the food system, what it is, the impact of food on people, the planet, and what we can all do, frankly, because we're not going to change a system, but we can definitely take positive, practical options.
It's bringing together two different types of book into one by the sound. So I look forward to seeing that.
Thank you very much.
But you can order it now, but it's available in Jan next year.
That's right. It's launching in Jan next year, and it's available for pre-orders now at all your favourite retailers.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, Mallika, thanks so much for your openness, honesty, authenticity. Really enjoyed it. And thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been an absolute pleasure. And you're very good at this, obviously, teasing out all the things I haven't spoken about before. So thank you.
We really hope you enjoyed this episode of The Fourth Bottom Line. Please hit subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode, and do leave a rating and a review wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to learn more about my work, follow me on LinkedIn, visit my website paulhargreaves.co.uk, or look out for my two books, Forces for Good and The Fourth Bottom Line. Thank you so much for listening.